Hey guys, Casual Retro Gamer here. First-person shooters. A genre that defined computer gaming since the release of Doom in 1993, spawning a series of imitations as developers attempted to cash in on the popularity of the ID juggernaut. The Commodore Amiga also had its fair share of FPS games, and today we're going to take a look at 3 such titles. So, what better place to start than Doom's namesake on the Amiga? Gloom. Developed by Mark Sibley of Black Magic and released by Guildhall in 1995, Gloom is probably the first game most people will think of when looking for a first-person shooter on the Amiga. Gloom falls as a halfway house between games such as Wolfenstein and Doom, as it features the single-level playfield of the former but the textured scenarios of the latter. Graphically, the game is not as sharp as the PC alternatives and offers a plethora of options to help get it running smoothly on your Amiga. The game does require the AGA chipset, so at the most basic you will be running this on an Amiga 1200, but its 68020 processor and 2MB of RAM can struggle to produce a decent frame rate at times, which unfortunately is actually a common problem of Amiga FPS games. If you want to enjoy this genre fully, an accelerator is highly recommended. My Amiga, from which this footage is recorded, has been expanded with a 40MHz 030 accelerator and 128MB RAM. And as you can see with this setup, the game runs buttery smooth, full screen, or even in the high resolution 2x1 pixel mode, which creates this rectangular image, but does noticeably sharpen it. Sound effects in games should be fairly familiar to any fans of the Aliens films, as sounds of doors, enemy cries and even robots have been lifted directly from that. There is a noticeable lack of music in the game, which can almost be forgiven on the Amiga 1200 floppy version, but CD audio on the CD32 version would not have gone amiss. Weapon sound effects are fairly simple, but then again, so is the arsenal of guns you get. Controls in the game are as you would expect for the time. The standard keyboard layout is familiar to that of Doom, but the game also makes good use of the CD32's joypad, putting movement on the D-pad, strafing onto the shoulder buttons and fire on red. Despite this layout though, the game does not allow for circle strafing, which would have been helpful at times when you are being swarmed by enemies. Switches are pressed automatically, and likewise doors open automatically as you approach them. Speaking of which, gameplay in Gloom, like all FPS games of the time, puts you into a map with an almost defined corridor to the exit. Game mechanics are nothing more than finding the next switch to open the next door, kill the next bunch of enemies, then rinse and repeat. The introduction of teleporters in later levels does go some way to help keeping gameplay fresh, as at times you will teleport into a large room and have to fight off a serious onslaught of enemies. In all, this is a basic formula, but one that does work perfectly well. There are better games with better level designs out there, but for what it is, Gloom gets the job done adequately. Any FPS game is only as good as its weapons, and this is unfortunately one area that Gloom suffers. There is no weapon animation, which I feel detaches the player from the immersive feeling a game like this should offer, as there is no representation of your player in the game world. The weapons themselves are nothing more than orange, green or blue projectiles, resembling the Doom plasma gun but with a slower rate of fire. Each weapon can be upgraded 5 times, with the 6th upgrade giving you a double shot that lasts for a few seconds. Once you move to a new weapon type, there is no option to change back, and enemies fire the same shots back at you, so it all starts to become a little samey by say the 5th or 6th level. Despite the poor weapon lineup, Gloom is still a great game and one I would highly recommend. A 1997 re-release called Gloom Deluxe did add improved graphics for those with even faster Amigas, and also added that missing gun animation, but offered little more in enhancements. Sound effects are also changed in that version, but for me, well, they changed for the worse. I will take a closer look into Gloom Deluxe later in this series, but for now, and for the original, it is a game certainly worthy of your time. Alien Breed 3D. Developed by Team 17 and released by Ocean Software in 1995, Alien Breed 3D is the fourth game in the series, but the first to explore this world in 3D. The first thing to note in game is the small view window. The playfield is obviously kept small to help with frame rate, and the developers tried to disguise this by creating a HUD around the screen. The image of the heart, you would think, is some indication of your player's life, but no, it's just a static image. These squares indicate the various coloured door cards and will light up when you collect said cards. The life bar is on the left and an ammo counter is on the right, but in all, the HUD is basic. Graphically, the game runs at a very low resolution, making it difficult at times to see where you are and where you need to go, but this is required to get the decent frame rate on stock hardware. Like Gloom, this is an AGA game, so requires the Amiga 1200 as a minimum. But to be honest though, the game does still struggle on a stock 1200 and isn't really playable. An accelerator is demanded, or even a memory upgrade as a minimum. Personally, I would have liked to have seen more graphical settings like we got in Gloom, so those with an accelerator could make the game look better, but it is what it is. Unlike Gloom, there is no real options to change graphics other than stretching the image to full screen or turning off the floor textures. The first thing in game that will catch your eye is the stairs right in front of you when you start and the gun animation in front of your player. So yes, this is more like Doom as it takes height into the maps and gives you a proper arsenal of weapons to choose from. The basic gun, a shotgun, a grenade launcher and a plasma weapon. Like Doom, the shotgun in Alien Breed is without doubt the weapon you will be spending the most time with. It's a very satisfying weapon to use and can provide one-shot kills on the basic aliens, but then the likes of the floating heads can take over 4 shots. The grenade launcher does pack a punch but requires a very accurate shot to make it effective. The plasma gun has a fast rate of fire, and while each shot is not that powerful, the fire rate more than makes up for this. The basic gun is exactly that, your fallback weapon when all else fails. This game though is not just as run and gun as it may first appear, as like the top-down originals you do need to keep an eye on your ammo, which is limited. Even on the first level, the trigger happy could run out of ammo, and if you do, well, there is little hope in finishing. Gameplay, like Gloom, and like any FPS of this time, is a simple matter of finding key cards, finding switches, opening doors and making your way to the exit. Level design can feel a bit claustrophobic at times, with some areas being very small, and this coupled with the low resolution can make it a bit difficult to see where you're going. But the linear layout of each area will generally always have you going in the right direction. And so long as you do not stretch the image onto too big of a screen, it works fine. The game is extremely well balanced and a joy to play. That shotgun is so satisfying to use with its single shot kill that even a room filled with enemies can be taken out quickly enough to leave a smile on your face. Sound effects get the job done, and like Gloom there is a noticeable lack of music again. The aliens die with a satisfying scream taken straight out of the original games. Gun sound effects are spot on and fit the weapons they are paired with. Controls are similar to Gloom, but this time we get the feature to customise the keyboard layout. The CD32 joypad and mouse input is also supported by pressing J or M on the keyboard respectively. The game makes good use of the CD32 joypad, but oddly has green assigned to fire, with red appearing to do nothing. Blue opens doors and right shoulder enables strafing. The left shoulder button changes weapons. The game does not support circle strafing, but with the maps being so tight there would be little chance to use it anyway. The controls in the game are extremely tight and very responsive, adding to the great balance of the game and the enjoyment. In all, Alien Breed 3D is a fantastic FPS on the Amiga and one I do highly recommend. Fears. Developed by Bomb Software and released by Manic also in 1995, This 3D shooter follows the style of Alien Breed as it presents itself with height in the maps and a gun animation. Like the others, Fears requires the AGA chipset, but this time we get options to tweak the size of the screen and turn on or off floor texturing. My expanded Amiga has no trouble playing this game full screen, full speed, and even my CD32 with just its 8MB memory expansion can run the game smoothly. So from that point of view, this is one of the easier games to get working well. The resolution is again low, but the textures have been well designed so not to look overly blurry, even when playing full screen. The enemy sprites are a lot sharper than the background and are simple in design, so this does help them stand out easier, but they do lack a bit in animation. The Amiga 1200 and CD32 versions have different enemy types in the same position on the same maps. I have no idea why this was done. Does anyone know? The gun sprite is very clear, and so much so that it almost looks out of place at times. But there is a serious lack of animation here, especially in the shotgun. The lineup of weapons this time includes a knife, shotgun, minigun, rocket launcher, plasma gun and a saw. The guns get the job done, but the shotgun is lacking in animation and really doesn't pack that punch a shotgun should do in these games. I would much rather have preferred another basic handgun than move on to the shotgun, but it is what it is. The minigun is as you would expect and can mow through the enemies quite quickly. The rocket launcher and plasma gun are also effective, but killing an enemy with these yields the same death animation. I'd much rather have had an exploding or melting animation, like in Doom. The saw is, well, not really useful, as you need to get close to use it, and all enemy types, or those I've come across anyway, fire projectiles, so you're not getting close enough to use the saw without taking significant damage. Sound effects in the game are a bit hollow, but we do get atmospheric background music, which is nice, but nowhere near as good as the music in Doom. It gets the job done, it's just not great, and to be honest, well, that is something you'll find yourself saying over and over again while playing this game. The controls are fine, but the standard keyboard layout is not the most comfortable. The CD32 version is considerably better, but for some reason full joypad is not supported on the Amiga 1200 version. One redeeming feature is that the controls do allow for circle strafing, but the standard keyboard layout makes this almost impossible to pull off. On the CD32, with strafing assigned to the shoulder buttons, it becomes more natural to slide your way around corners. I just wish the player would turn a bit quicker, as there are multiple occasions where you will be getting shot from behind and it takes what seems an age for your player to turn around. Gameplay has the same mechanics as Gloom or Alien Breed, it's just that Fears doesn't really pull you in. It all works, but it's not that interesting. Each element of the game is okay. The graphics are probably the best thing about it, but the weapons, coupled with the lack of detail and animation in enemies, just makes the whole thing a bit boring if I'm honest. There are also cheap deaths designed into the maps. For example, even on the second level, if you fall into the lava, it's death. Not instant death, it's just you can't get out. Handy then that they give you an instant death key on the keyboard. Enemies in later levels are increasingly difficult to deal with, making the gameplay tedious at times. In all, Fears looks as if it should be a great FPS game, but it just doesn't come together for me when compared to Gloom or Alien Breed 3D. So in conclusion, the Amiga, like any platform, has its good and bad games. There are plenty more out there and I will get to them later in this series, but for now, out of the three we looked at today, it's between Gloom and Alien Breed as to which is best. Personally, I think Alien Breed 3D just edges out Gloom, as for me it provides that fuller Doom clone experience. Out of these three, which one do you think looks best? Well, that's all for this episode. Thank you very much for watching Casual Retro Gamer, and I'll see you next time.